Thank you. I'm blessed by all of you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardha Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayam Viṣṇupād Paramahamsa Parivrajākacārya Jayasthar Tarashata Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, Abhay Charanaravinda, Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai, Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shai Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Nugovardhan Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai, Brihat Mridanga Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Krishna Lounge Program Ki Jai, Kartik Vrata Ki Jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
One quick thing, in case you guys are parked out front, there's a Chevy Volt and a Mini Cooper street sweepings coming through, so if that's either of you.
The other side of the street is fine, it's just this side. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer our respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Srila Vyasadeva, and thank you. Yeah, late night last night. Unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and to Srila Prabhupada, and unto all the Vaishnavas, as long as we're at it. So, we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto. And Dravida Prabhu mentioned yesterday the topic of the 6th canto, prescribed duties for mankind. And we're in chapter 1, the history of the life of Ajamil. So, such a great chapter. I just got to switch glasses here. One second here. Sorry, just gotta get a little. I wrote down something nice, and I'm not going to share it this moment, but I really want to share it. Actually, Srila Prabhupada at least on ISKCON Desire Tree, he gave 2 classes on this verse. One in San Francisco in 76, and one in 75 rather, and one in LA in 76. So I listened to both of those, and there was, so much nectar, but there was one I definitely wanted to share, so I jotted it down. Unfortunately, where did it go? I may have to just paraphrase it, but let's see. Okay, I won't hold you up forever. One last attempt. Otherwise, I'll have to rely on memory power. Oh boy. No, it's okay. There's enough anartas in here to sink a battleship, but okay, so it's okay. So, we are on text 39. Yes. Yeah? Okay. We did. Yeah, thank you. Katam swit driyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho swit katichin nrinam katam katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam
katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam
dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam. Matajis. Katasvidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam katam svidriyate danda kim vasya stanam ipshitam dandya kim karina sarve aho svit katichinrinam. Okay. All right, so now we're going to do the word meanings. Katam svit, by which means. Driyate is imposed. Danda, punishment. Kim, what? Va, or. Asya, of this. Stanam, the place. Ipshitam, desirable. Dandya, punishable. Kim, whether. Karina, fruit of actors. Sarve, all. Aho, swit, or whether. Katichit, some. Nrinam, of the human beings. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. What is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? Please repeat. What is the process of punishing others? Who are the actual candidates for punishment? Are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable? Or only some of them? Srila Prabhupada's purport. One who has the power to punish others should not punish everyone. There are innumerable living entities, the majority of whom are in the spiritual world and are nitya mukta, everlastingly liberated. There is no question of judging these liberated living beings. Only a small fraction of the living entities, perhaps 1/4, are in the material world, and the major portion of the living entities in the material world, 8 million of the 8,400,000 forms of life, are lower than human beings. They are not punishable, for under the laws of material nature, they are automatically evolving. Human beings who are advanced in consciousness are responsible, but not all of them are punishable. Those engaged in advanced pious activities are beyond punishment. Only those who engage in sinful activities are punishable. Therefore, the Viṣṇudūtas particularly inquired about who is punishable and why Yamarāja has been designated to discriminate between who is punishable and who is not. How is one to be judged? What is the basic principle of authority? These are the questions raised by the Viṣṇudūtas. Om Jnanatamārandasya Ganan Shalakaya Chakshurun Minitinena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhuvevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaha. So, we're coming to a point here, right? The Yamadūtas were attempting to take the soul of Jamil, getting ready to try. The Viṣṇudūtas forbade them. The Yamadūtas were shocked that they were being hampered in the execution of their duties. Srimad Prabhu mentioned yesterday that this was quite surprising. Apparently, this concept of a sinful person chanting the holy name and the Viṣṇudūtas arriving there was, they'd never experienced that. So this was, quite something because, and now the Viṣṇudūtas are, beginning to examine the Yamadūtas. And I found it also quite interesting in the context of Srila Prabhupada's purport. The first thing that he's really explaining, is that we are just such a slim minority of living entities, right? And, the vast majority of the living beings live in the spiritual world and have nothing to do with crime and punishment, so to speak. They have nothing to do with sinful activities. All of their activities are harmonious with the Lord, the Lord's activities, the Lord's pastimes. They're part of the Lord's Leela, and they're reciprocating beautifully, perfectly with the Lord. So there's complete harmony in the spiritual world, right? So that's actually the majority of the living entities. And we understand from the Vedic literatures that in the midst of this vast, unlimited creation of the Lord, which is all composed of the Lord's multifarious energies, in one little corner there's like a cloud that occurs. And within this cloud-like sphere, the whole material creation, maintenance, and annihilation takes place cyclically, right? Because we have some desire to enjoy separately from the Lord. Therefore, the Lord creates a place where we can do that. So it's a little cloudy. Things are not so clear. And there's that nice verse in the Gita. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything, just as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So when we are in a bright sunny day, everything is pretty clear. You can see even me with, 65-year-old vision, even without my glasses. If it's a bright sunny day, I can see everything pretty well. I can drive a car, I can read a book, right? But as soon as there's a little diminishment of light, everything is much more difficult. What to speak of in the dark, right? So Krishna gives that nice analogy that just like we can see everything clearly in the sun, right? Similarly, when we become Krishna conscious, this knowledge Krishna is giving in the Bhagavad Gita, it enables us to see everything properly in the proper perspective and understand everything very clearly, right? So that's the situation in the spiritual world. But in order to make this facility for those of us that want to try and enjoy separately from our relationship of Krishna, in other words, Krishna is the Purusha. He's the only Purusha. He's the only supreme controller and enjoyer. And we are all Krishna's energy, which is Prakriti. Krishna is the energetic source, and we are the energy. And this is the natural way that everything exists. And generally, all of the energies are working harmoniously with the energetic source. And Prabhupada explains that Krishna is the predominating enjoyer, and we are the predominated enjoyers, right? But what is the business between us? The business is enjoyment, right? Right? So there's just a distinction. In other words, in our pure state, we are pure spirit souls. We are Krishna's superior energy. We are conscious. We are capable of relationships. We are capable of exchanging love. And that is the business that goes on between every living being and the Supreme Lord, and each other in the context of the service of the Lord in pure consciousness. This is what's going on, right? So, however, when we want to pretend, so to speak, to be the predominating enjoyer, when we want to try to put ourselves, in the role of God, I want to be the enjoyer, I want to be the controller. So that's very disharmonious with the actual situation. So Krishna creates this little cloud and the whole material world. He very expertly expands as the different Vishnu forms, Mahavishnu, all these material universes are set out. He then glances over them and fathers all of us jivas who want to have this material experience into the womb of material nature. Everything is going so nicely like that, right? So we're all here, trying to do this thing, trying to imitate Krishna. And this requires there to be some darkness, right? Because as soon as one sees everything clearly in the light, in its proper perspective, it's ludicrous, right? It's ludicrous, right? So, but therefore we require some darkness so that we can kind of like this word ignorance is an interesting word because it's a state of ignoring, right? So as soon as we ignore Krishna, we are put into ignorance, right? This is the state of ignorance. We're actually ignoring Krishna, and we're ignoring ourselves, and we're ignoring the natural relationship that eternally exists between us and Krishna. I was reading the other day, it was really amazing the way Prabhupada was explaining this point. I don't want to bring up what it was in relation to was the fall of the jiva, which is this perennial, thing that goes on and on and on, and Prabhupada, told the story of the crow and the tall fruit logic and said basically it's really not worth putting a lot of time into. But leading into the crow and tall fruit logic story, Prabhupada gave this beautiful example, and he said that when you dream, right, like everybody sleeps, and some of us are more conscious of our dreams than others, but ultimately all of us have dreams, and sometimes we recall them. So in that dreaming state, right, we're seeing ourselves as, a king or a queen or a princess or we're running along the shore, or something's about to happen, or some monster we're moving up towards Halloween, right? Some monster comes out of the bush and tries to grab us, or, whatever. Things are going on, and they tend to be mixed up in very bizarre ways, right? Generally, unless you have spiritual dreams. Sometimes devotees have dreams that are like crystal clear and they're getting some instruction. But generally, material consciousness, we're having a dream. So within that dream, Prabhupada points out, there is a seer, and there is what is seen, right? We are seeing ourselves doing this and doing that and engaging in all kinds of actually illusory activities. But then there's a seer, which in this case is us, right? We are seeing ourselves engaging in these temporary illusory activities. And they're temporary because then when we wake up, we realize, oh, that was just a dream, right? That doesn't really tie into my life of who I identify myself as, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, whatever it is, American, Russian, Mexican, So like we have this higher sense of who we are, reality in the sense that we're living in this body for many, many years, whereas the dream was like that, very, very quick, right? So anyway, Prabhupada points out that this point of the seer and the seen, right? So the seen is an illusion, but the seer is a constant, right? So in the same way, Srila Prabhupada says that when we give up this attempt to be the enjoyer and the controller, to compete with Krishna, to enjoy separately from Krishna, to absorb ourselves in trying to squeeze happiness out of this material world, so much so that we're just chasing after these temporary illusory goals one after the other, and we're going around and we're generating karma, and we're getting sucked into this. I have a friend named Tara, and he uses the word bamboozled. We're getting bamboozled by the material energy, and we're just going around and around. It's this very sad situation. So when somebody finally wakes up from this illusory dream and takes to Krishna consciousness and goes back home, back to Godhead, Prabhupada uses that same example. It's like we just woke up and we're the seer. And what we just saw, this entire material existence, which sometimes the word anadi is used, without beginning, because generally we become so sucked in that we can be here for so long that it almost seems eternal, right? You think of this wheel of samsara, lifetimes after lifetimes. And like Prabhupada pointed out here, that amongst all these living entities, who is actually to be judged? It's the humans. Because when we're in the animal species, this is what Darwin got wrong. Yes, there is an evolution, but it's not that, it's not that one body is gradually evolving into another. All the species are there, but the soul, according to our karmic reactions, is evolving through a sequence of bodies. So we generate karma during this human life, and then that karma causes us to evolve through so many, many species as we're working out the reactions of all these activities, right? So anyhow, Prabhupada uses that example, and it was so, beautiful that like when we wake up from the material dream, we, the seer, looks at that material dream, which might have been for eons, and it was just like a dream, right? So that's the real us. And anyone intelligent doesn't try to mold their life around their dreams, right? You think about it. You wake up and, oh my gosh, it's time to go to the temple, it's time to go to work, it's time to go to school, right? By the end of the day, unless it was a really scary one or a really meaningful one, you forgot the dream, right? Because it wasn't really a significant part of who you are and what your real business is and what is meaningful to you and what is actually going to further your goals in life. It was just like a little phantasmagoria, right? So in the same way, this material existence is like that. And this purport is so nice because it's really showing us what is the real position. Like sometimes a lot of us, sometimes we use these terminologies, first generation devotees, second generation, which refers to people who, as a young adult or as a person, found the Hare Krishna movement and started rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna. So sometimes the example is used, that's like a first generation, somebody who came to it. Second generation is like they get married and have children, and the children are grown up in the movement. And sometimes they call them second generation, right? So anyhow, a lot of us first generation people, because we had this whole material experience, we were, pursuing these different goals, we were moving in a certain direction, and we take to Krishna consciousness, and, don't feel put on the spot, and I'll start with myself. Sometimes you might sit back and think, what the heck am I doing, God's a blue boy, we're dancing around plants at 5 o'clock in the morning, singing songs, When I was 15, I happened to move to a commune in Leucadia. I'd come out from the East Coast. And I'd been to the temple a few times on the East Coast before I came out here. So I convinced a guy who had a vehicle to drive me down to the Sunday feast one Sunday. Those days it was on 3rd and Thorn, I think. And I remember I'd been to temples in New York and Philadelphia, but somehow I hadn't picked up on Tulsi Puja. It's the first time I consciously recall Tulsi Puja. And it was at the Sunday feast. And after, this was 72, and after some part in the feast anyway, we all went out in the yard and we were dancing around Tulsi, and it was mostly guests. There were like some devotees there, but there were a ton of guests, and mostly hippies. And so we're all dancing around this plant, playing mridungas and kartals. And I remember thinking, this is far out, what to speak of what the neighbors thought and the people driving by, So, sometimes you might lean back and think, what am I doing? You know what I mean? Like in this world, the Hare Krishna movement is such a microcosm, you know what I mean? And you look out at the macro world and you think, gee, I was just about to there's a nice devotee in the Ypsilanti community, Siddha Hari. This guy's he's like a Sadhuputa in development. He was, PhD, in all kinds of scientific disciplines, He was a few months away from his PhD, and he met the devotees, Deva Madhava gave him a book, and he's from India, and he read it, and it was he just dropped out, skipped his PhD. He has a few regrets now, but anyway, so someone might lean back, and there I was, I was about to, there was a devotee in Sydney. He was temple president for years, Pratapana. He was a successful lawyer, with a wife and kids, and same thing. He met the devotees on Harinam and read the book and thought, what the heck am I doing? But on the other hand, someone could lean back and think, what the heck am I, doing? I'm wearing this, simple cloth. And I have a friend, he was a college student and University of Mississippi. And same thing, he saw the Harinam, got a book, went to the temple, ate prasadam, joined up, right? And this is a little extreme, but after he had moved in, he donated his car, he donated his life savings. He was from quite a wealthy family, and this was New Taliban anyway, in the 70s. And then he realized he needed a toothbrush, so he asked, and the guy said, I know where there's one. Go down this hall, go down those stairs, down in the basement. I saw one the other day, so it was one that somebody had been cleaning the grout, So he told me this story, And no devotee, he just accepted, they were very tight. I think he must have talked to the treasurer, talked to the wrong guy, The first treasurer was Gargamuni, Prabhupada called him, Gargamuni, So anyway, it's so anyway, but, he became a nice devotee, traveling Sankirtan, so many things, but, sometimes one might think, what am I doing? I joined this little far out, offbeat religious sect, but actually, what are we doing in this material world? The majority of the souls are beautifully, harmoniously serving Krishna 24/7. They don't even need to sleep. Okay, how beautiful the deities are today. They were dressed by Leela Shakti and Bhaktivatsal, I left their home last night at 10:30. There were 35 people in their living room. They got to bed respectively at midnight and 1 o'clock. They were here at 4 o'clock getting ready to dress the deities, right? So, after Leela Shakti cooked the 40-course feast for 50 people last night and fed everybody, everybody finally left and they cleaned their house, put the deities to rest, So, this is how devotees attain their spiritual bodies, by engaging in this wonderful process of devotional service that we've been given, because the reality is in the spiritual world, you don't need all these, sleeping and all these things. They can just fully. So the majority of the souls, this is what they're doing. This is the normal condition of life, is to be blissfully absorbed in loving devotion to the Lord. Actually, that is what we are made for. Our constitutional position, according to Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Jivara Swarupa Hoy Nitya Krishna Das, right? Nitya, eternal, Krishna, Krishna, Das, servant, right? Jivara, the living entity, Swarupa, our eternal form. Our eternal form is to be a servant of Krishna. This is what we are made for. Like when you do work, Bhakti Tyler's got to know this because he does a lot of work around here. If you have the right tool, the job goes pretty well. If you don't, and you know this too, if you don't have the right tool, right? Try sawing a board with a hammer, you know what I mean? Or try hammering a nail with a monkey wrench, you know, which we sometimes do, right? Can't find the hammer, oh, it's kind of heavy, you know, right? Look at your thumb a few minutes later, you know. So it's much, much harder, right? Without using the right tools, right? So similarly, what is it? Round peg in a square hole, right? We are constitutionally designed to exchange loving service with Lord Krishna. It's actually what we're made for. And everything else we try to do, Srila Prabhupada says, eternal spirit soul in a temporary material body, it's an incompatible situation, right? We are by nature Sat Chit Ananda, eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. And we are living in bodies and identifying with minds and bodies that are asat, achit, and nirananda, right? Temporary, ignorant, and full of miseries. Who can contest, right? Who can contest? Can anybody contest that this is the actual fact, right? Miseries are coming, ignorance is there, right? So this is an incompatible situation, and we need to recognize that fact, right? So that we can get with the program and not be stranded here in this material world. Like, you know, you have those movies like Robinson Crusoe or those books, right? Somebody gets stranded on a desert island. You know, it's a very difficult situation. Unless there's a lot of coconut trees, maybe it's okay. You know, you can live on coconuts, but otherwise it's quite difficult, you know? So we are stranded like that. Devotees used to do that play of The Fish Out of Water, right? I think Kalakanta Prabhu wrote it. But it's a great play, you know. There's a fish and he's swimming close to the shore, and, you know, fish are conscious, you know. He's looking up and he sees, you know, like it's California, man, you know, bored guys are walking by all buffed and the beautiful girls in the bikinis, and, you know, he's thinking like, wow, pretty good up there. They're drinking smoothies and, you know, organic this and that, and like, maybe I should check it out, you know. So, you know, and then the fish comes up and the people are really nice and they say, oh, you're really special, you know. They give him a throne, they, you know, give him one of those, you know, pina coladas and whatever. He's sitting under an umbrella. But after a few minutes, he starts, you know, dying. Why? Because he's a creature of the water and he cannot get the sustenance that he needs on the land, right? He needs to be thrown back into the water. So in the same way, we can endeavor so sincerely in this material world, and we can achieve what we can achieve to varying degrees according to our previous karma, right? And according to our effort and our endeavor like that. But we have to observe honestly that whatever we achieve is taken away by time, right? I mean, you know, you get Genghis Khan, you know, some of the Alexander the Great, some of these guys, they conquered like half the world in 20 years and all these kind of things. But what do they have to show for it, right? What did they have to show for it? Alexander the Great, when he passed away, you know, he called his intimate generals that had just helped him conquer half the world. And he said, I'm dying and I have a last request, you know. And they're like, yes, anything, whatever you tell us, you know. Said, so after I've died, when my body, in like a coffin type thing, is being carried to the final resting place, you have that carried by my doctors. And yes, you know. And I want that my feet and my hands will be outside of the casket. Everyone can see, yes. And as we are being carried in procession, I want this to be a big procession that everyone will see. As we're being carried in procession, I want you, my loyal generals, to go into my treasury and be strewing valuable gold coins and jewels along the way. Yes, anything you say. So they were, they'd followed this guy to hell and back. They'd fought on every battlefield. They even entered India. They started in Greece, and they not only walked to India, they fought to India. You know what I mean? They even defeated one king in India, apparently. So, these guys were ready to do whatever Alexander said, right? So they said, but one question, we'll do anything you say, but these are unusual requests. What is the meaning? So he said, I want my doctors to be carrying my, Paul, because I want everyone to see that even if you have the best doctors, which I do, when your time is up, your time is up. No one can save you. Prahlad Maharaj also pointed this out, right? And I want it that my hands and arms will be sticking out, showing that when you go, no matter how much you accumulate in this world, you can't take anything with you, right? You can't take anything with you. And I want these riches to be strewn along the way to show also that whatever you accumulated, it stays here. It's still here. Kind of a similar point, that you can't hold on to any of your achievements in this material world. So this is like, these examples are good, just like the Bhagavatam. It's full of these amazing examples of extremes, right? Extreme situation where devotees were put in extreme difficulty and the Lord saved them in miraculous ways. So we think, okay, my struggle's not quite like Arjuna's. It's not quite like the Pandavas. It's not quite like, fighting against Ravana, right? So we have our struggles, but we can understand these same principles, that if I surrender to Krishna, right, Krishna will preserve what I have and carry what I lack. He will maintain me, He will protect me, like that. So anyhow, as it's being pointed out here in today's purport, that we are a very, very small minority, and the place we are living is virtually a little dark cloud. Sometimes the example is given, it's the prison house, because we've wanted to take the property of the Lord without offering it back in return. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, those who eat food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin, right? Krishna says, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me. In this way, you'll be released from all the reactions to your good and evil deeds, and by this principle of renunciation, of offering everything to me, you'll be liberated and you'll come to me. Others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin, right? So this principle is that we have tried to enjoy Krishna's energy, right? We are stealing Krishna's energy, right? And therefore, we are in the prison house, right? And within the prison, the standard of life, as everyone knows, is not very nice. Just like in the prison, you're stuck in a cell, you have to eat whatever they give you, you don't get much sunshine, you don't get much fresh air, the company's not always that great, right? So this is the material world, right? Whereas in the outside society, generally people are happier, they're more free, they have, so what to speak of the distinction between the material world and the spiritual world. So, as my Pratvadarshik Guru, Sriman George Harrison sung, hope to get out of this place by the Lord Sri Krishna's grace, my salvation from this material world. So the mission is, right, everybody likes a challenge, everybody likes a mission. The mission is to get the heck out of here, right? And the process is being explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that we simply have to engage ourselves in loving devotional service, which begins with hearing and chanting. Thank you. Shravanam Kirtanam Viṣṇu. And the concrete example here that we've been studying is even one name, Ajamil, Narayan. Even when I mentioned last week, but because it was that verse, the people helping Prabhupada with the books, they had put Narayan, Narayan, Narayan. Prabhupada said, no, not 3 times, once, Narayan. Once is sufficient. Change that. Prabhupada was reading from a manuscript. It wasn't published yet. And Prabhupada detected that error. One name. So I'll end with this. This is another nice little story. It sort of ties into this. It's from the Padma Purana, which is one of the Satvata Puranas, and Srila Prabhupada often quoted from it. So We all know about Lord Ram, right? Who was Lord Ram married to? Sita. And who was Sita's father? Janak, right? And Janak Maharaj, he's also one of the 12 great authorities on devotional service in the universe, one of the great teachers, the Mahajans. So anyway, this sort of ties into this, this principle of the holy names and Yamarāja and hell. It's just another nice example, along with the example of Ajamil, of the potency of the holy name. So when King Janak, this great Mahajan, this great pure devotee, who was a great devotee of Lord Ramachandra, when he was preparing to leave this world, there was a spiritual vimana that came, spiritual plane, as we often see when great personalities are going back to Godhead. And he was traveling in that vimana, Haribol Damodar, on his way back home, back to Godhead, Hare Krishna. And as they were traveling, they happened to pass Yamaloka, right? And as the air that was touching the transcendental body of Janak Maharaj was blowing by, just like there is movement of air throughout space in the material world, when that air touched the suffering souls in Yamaloka, who were very, very sinful and who were being tortured in what's called hell, right? When those souls felt the air that had blown past Janak, who was flying by, and touched them, they immediately just felt this amazing sense of relief. It was like some of them were being, like they were embracing the red-hot form, they were being torn apart by thorny trees, all these things were going on, they were suffering like anything, and all of a sudden, like hell is just suffering on top of suffering, right? A little point, it's not eternal. That is one distinction. We don't believe in eternal hell. But anyway, it's a place that people go to kind of help get things sorted out karmically. So they were suffering like anything, and suddenly they felt so much relief. And when they felt this relief, they hadn't felt any relief since the time they got there. So they looked up, where is this coming? They could feel the breeze, and they saw this exalted devotee, Janak Maharaj, and they were calling out, help, please, please. They just felt so much relief. And he said, what is that? He heard these voices, and very pained voices. He came down and he was observing the situation. They're saying, please, we're feeling so much relief from your presence, please, stay, and he's on his way back to Godhead, right? So he thought, well, wait a second, whether I go back to Godhead, he was Krishna conscious. He was Ram conscious. So he thought, okay, if by my staying these souls can feel some relief, let me stay, right? So there he was at the gate of Yamaloka, right? So then Yamarāja, in the course of his routine duties, Yamarāja shows up and he sees this exalted pure devotee there, right? Janak Maharaj, and they're both Mahajans, so obviously they're well acquainted with one another. And he's like, Janak Maharaj, what are you doing here? This is the place for sinful people. And he said, well, he told the story. I was flying by and like this and like that. And Yamarāja is like, you don't belong here. No, but they asked me to stay. So I want to benefit them. Can I give up the result of all of my pious activities so that they can be delivered, right? Can they take all the merit from all of my devotional activities so that they can be delivered from this hellish condition? This is a Vaishnava. Every morning we're saying that the Vaishnava, they're full of compassion for all living beings, right? What does that mean? Rather than go back to Godhead, let me stay here in Yamaloka so that these souls can be benefited. Talk about the compassion of a Vaishnava. So he was willing to do that, right? Yamarāja is like, no, you don't belong here. And he said, well, let me give all of my spiritual merit to deliver them. And Yamarāja, because by the grace of Krishna, Yamarāja has this capacity to see everything, practically everywhere, in all the people in the material world. And Yamarāja say, well, look, if you want to do something, one morning when you woke up, you were feeling very spiritually enthused, and you chanted, Ram, Ram. And if you just give them the benefit from that utterance of the name of Ram, and yes, 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 and then immediately all those people in hell attained their spiritual forms and went back to Godhead like that. So, that was two utterances. Ajamil was one. So, of course, sometimes they say Ram 3 times, Krishna once. So anyway, these are different examples of how all of the suffering of the material world It's there because we're caught up in this law of karma, reincarnation, samsara, all that's going on. But if we just take to this process of Krishna consciousness, if we just take to this chanting of the holy names of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, then this entire, just like the guy waking up after the bad dream, this entire material existence is, we wake up, we're there, the devotees are there, Krishna's there. Oh, I had a bad dream. I don't want to go there again, right? So anyway, we better end with that. Thank you all. Are there any corrections, comments, questions? Janavi. Oh! Kaldung Brain, yeah, thank you so much. I shared it with her, and I thought she'd appreciate it. Yeah, so this is a quick one. So, in 1975, in the month of July, just after leaving Philadelphia, as a matter of fact, Srila Prabhupada went to San Francisco and continued lecturing on this section. And on this verse, Prabhupada, because one of the big questions here is, who should be punished, right? And who shouldn't be punished, and who's qualified to make those judgments? So Prabhupada was explaining, and because of the time's already up, I'll just cut to the chase, so to speak. So he's speaking in San Francisco, and you're just hearing Prabhupada speaking, right? But then sometimes you get to a point where everybody laughs, or there's some exclamation, and you realize, oh my God, there's like hundreds of devotees in the room. Prabhupada would come somewhere, and every devotee within 1,000 miles would show up there, immediately. So anyway, it was kind of like that. So Prabhupada was explaining that actually there's 5 types of people that should not be punished. And Prabhupada elaborated: the Brahmins, the women, the children, the cow, and the saintly persons, right? And Prabhupada gave some examples, just like, and I remember seeing myself in Loy Bazaar, all the people are there, all the fruit stands are there, all the cows are wandering around, and suddenly a cow will just jump over and grab an apple or grab some vegetables, you know what I mean? And the cow's not going to be punished for that. Of course, the merchant might raise the stick and say, oh, get away, hot, hot, hot. But like everybody's happy the cow got something, you know what I mean? So the cow's not to be punished, saintly person not to be punished, happy chet like that, the Brahmins aren't to be punished. And then right then, because all the mothers were there with their babies, and some babies are like, squawk, squawk, and the temple president, I guess, or some leader, jumped up and said, all the women and children should go out. And Prabhupada chuckled and said, no, women and children are never to be punished. So it was like Krishna had made the perfect arrangement to make his point, and then Prabhupada was explaining, like that. He said, no, women and children can never be punished, like that. So it was very sweet because it just came up immediately, like, all the women and children go out. And Prabhupada said, no, children cannot be punished. Women cannot be punished. And all the women and children were like, ah! So it's very sweet, actually. So anyway, just Janavi reminded me to share that. If you want to hear that, it's a lecture in San Francisco on this verse, but it's a very sweet. Dravida Prabhu.
I just happened to listen to that shloka.
Oh, you did?
Well, yeah, I looked up this section because we were on it, and I heard that. And whoever said that, I don't think he said all the women and children should leave. That would be
okay.
He said all the women should, all the children should leave.
Okay,
and then that stimulated Prabhupada to say what he said.
My exaggeration. I apologize.
Yeah, and what was I going to say? Oh yeah, there's some doubt in my mind, and I'm going to research this because I heard this sometime recently, and I forget where. This Janaka in the list of Mahajans is not the same Janaka.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize.
There's another Janaka, because I always thought that was the case, and somehow I was surprised to hear this, but and so I wanted to research it. I couldn't find it right now, but I'm going to keep researching.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Because Janaka is a fairly common name, so
right.
there's another Janaka, but I'm not. This is just still in research, so anyone who hears this, they don't quote it or anything. But I'll let you all know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, not that. The story you said is still pertinent. That was definitely the Janaka that we know so well. But there's another Janaka apparently who's, and they teach. That's the whole thing, is that there's a lot of teaching going on and preaching, and that's why the Mahaj. You'll find that these Mahajans that are listed, they all have their how should I say it? Their stage in the Bhagavatam. They have their point in the Bhagavatam where they're giving teachings, Of course, Shukadev, and Narada is most prominent. He comes in every single canto. Narada comes in and teaches. Some of them not, and Viṣṇudūtas with his prayers, they all have a spot. But I always wondered, we never hear from Janaka, except for Janaka. So that doesn't solve the mystery, but still there's something, there's a doubt that I'll resolve in further research.
Yeah, maybe you can let us know too.
I'll let you know.
It's quite interesting.
Who is this mysterious Janaka?
Yeah. Anyone else have a comment or question? Balaram Prabhu.
If this particular story that you told about Janaka Maharaj, and whether it's Ramchandra's father or another one, if it is Ramchandra's father-in-law, sorry. If it is Ramchandra's father-in-law, this particular case would demonstrate him being, one of them. It would, you could say, give more reason for us to understand how he's a Mahajan, in the sense that he's willing to go to hell and suffer for these people. Anyways, but we're not sure if that's him or not. But I was also thinking, why? Because you said all these Mahajans, they have teachings in the Bhagavatam, but we see with Janaka Maharaj he doesn't in the Bhagavatam. And I was thinking, well, why would he be accepted as a Mahajan aside from that? Is there any other?
Assuming it is someone else besides.
Yeah. Is there any other?
I don't know. Maybe he's prominent in some other Purana or something. I mean, it's still a question. It's an open question, which I'll try to solve.
Okay. Anyways.
Anything else from the cyber universe?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vijay Krishna.
Please, I'm always forgetting your name. I'm so sorry.
You got it?
Vaikuntha Das.
Vaikuntha Prabhu, please, Dandabat Pranams. My question is similar to the question just presented by Balaram Prabhu, and it goes as follows. What are the qualifications required for a servant of God to occupy the post of a Mahajan?
Well, I'll take a short crack at this, and Durita can probably give us the proper answer. But as it's explained in one of the important verses that talks about Mahajans, is that the hidden essential truth of all religious principles is established in their heart, right? So the Vedas are like, what did Maharaj say the other day, a jungle of words, right? In one sense, because the Vedic literature is so vast, and according to the different types of Puranas and the different types of, whether it's about worship or it's about fruitive activities, or it's just like everything's there. And whereas the Mahajans are those great authorities in devotional service who can extract the essence, right? And this has to be there because we are very small, and our ability to do that on our own is practically impossible, right? And then you bring it down to the present, and you have like the six Goswamis, you have like Srila Prabhupada, personalities who can take this cream and really present it in the most relevant way so that the people assimilate it. Because if you can't assimilate it, right, what's the point, right? Right. So, Mahajans are those that can actually understand the situation and guide us properly to reach the ultimate goal in the most effective and efficient way.
Well, you're right.
Everything you say. And the thing is that there's these, 12 Mahajans, just like there's 6 Goswamis. We know that they're, what the names are, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Sanatana, etc. But that doesn't, to be called a Goswami doesn't mean you're one of the 6 Goswamis. So these 12 Mahajans are special. They're mentioned. They're in the Bhagavatam, and they their teachings, as I mentioned, are prominent, especially except Janaka. But Mahajano Yena Gata Sapanta, there is that verse, and it doesn't say, you have to. That doesn't refer to the 12, Mahajan means pure devotee. Prabhupada was a Mahajan.
Right.
The verse goes, Tarko Pratishta Shuddhi Avabhinna, that the truth of Dharma cannot be ascertained just by arguing back and forth. And in even the Shrutis, if you read, as you mentioned, they're very vast. I remember my own experience when I was first starting, be curious about this philosophy. I remember it was in a library somewhere, and there were all the Upanishads. It was like 30 big, fat, green books, And I pulled one off the shelf. I don't even think I took one out, because it's so big. Prabhupada's books weren't there. I mean, they weren't. It was before Prabhupada wrote most of his books. But they're very vast, and they can be confusing. That's the beginning of the Bhagavatam was like that. Vyasadeva had already written all these books, but still he was dissatisfied. Meaning that, we would also be dissatisfied if that's all we had and to try to make our way through it. So in a similar way, the verse goes on, and to be a great rishi, you have to, defeat another rishi, so you can't just look at, it's not the learning, it's the Mahajan being the pure devotee. Who is willing and able to teach and preach, and therefore that's the by following that Mahajan you can get the secrets of Dharma which is hidden in their hearts. So Mahajan is used in that sense also, right. And Janaka, Sita's father, was undoubtedly Mahajan in that regard. So,
thank you, Dharita Prabhu, and thank you everyone for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.